And once again, a very good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Singapore International Cyber Week 2025. My name is Mike Tan. It is my honor to be your host for this afternoon, and thank you for being here with us at this high-level panel session. We have an exciting lineup of international panelists here to share their perspectives on the theme, Insights into 2025's Cyber Threats. Now, as cyber threats evolve to be more sophisticated and prevalent, understanding the current trends, tactics, and strategies employed by threat actors is crucial for businesses, government agencies, and individuals. You can hear insights into the current cyber threat landscape and engage with a panel of leaders and cybersecurity professionals as they delve into the latest developments in cyber threats. Without further ado, please join me now in welcoming Mr. Simon Green, President, Japan and Asia Pacific of Palo Alto Networks, to deliver the keynote speech. Mr. Green, please.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Unfortunately, before the panel starts, you're going to have to listen to me for 20 minutes. Hopefully what I'll do is set up what will be a very engaging panel conversation. There's one thing that I'm very, very certain about. This room understands the complexity of the environment that we are operating in. The clock is ticking. The realities of what's going on in the adversarial world is that the attackers are getting in and out of organizations now in minutes, not hours, not days, but in fact in minutes. And the reality is, by the time I finish speaking up here, the adversary could have gone in and got out of an organization. We have a threat intelligence business unit called Unit 42. Unit 42 actually created an attack using artificial intelligence. They built it from start to finish, and against a red team exercise, one of our clients, they were in and out in 25 minutes. From the start of that malware being created to the data being exfiltrated. So we are up against a very, very challenging environment. You would be very, very familiar with the NotPetya attack. This is Merck, one of the largest shipping companies in the world. This will give you a sense of the scale and the complexity of what happens when a supply chain is hit. When Merck was hit, not only was their organization brought down, 76 large ships around the world arrived at ports and could not offload the containers that were being carried. 76 ports were literally closed down. Now, the scale of this problem was not just Merck. This had global implications. The economic cost was approximately $10 billion. 300 million was the cleanup and recovery cost for Merck. But the global economic impact flowed deeply. With one company down, it cascaded right across the world. Now, as you think about that here in Singapore, Singapore's port has about 20% of the world's shipments come through this port that are offloaded every day and taken somewhere else. So the impact could be very, very real. The cost of cyber breach is going up. And I'm sure you've sat in sessions over the last couple of days where you've heard from governments around the world, you've heard from industry, that they're seeing this on an everyday basis. The scale of the problem is getting larger and larger. And unfortunately, speed is our enemy. That's why I said the clock is ticking. Critical infrastructure is under attack, as well as governments, as well as private organizations. But critical infrastructure is a deeply concerning threat vector with power grids, shipping, as I mentioned, telecommunications networks. The stakes are high and the potential impact to the citizens of countries are getting higher. Again, we're up against it. The costs are getting bigger. This is not an insurance opportunity anymore. This is a genuine defense opportunity where we have to come together. So that something I will like you to walk away with today, and which I will get to, but we have to collaborate. We have to simplify, and we have to do this with speed. And unfortunately, most of our organizations are not set up to deal with the speed of which this is moving. Said Singapore is the second busiest shipping port in the world. Last year, Singapore moved 41 million 20-foot containers. Approximately 85% of those containers were redistributed globally. 20% of the world's containers come through here. This port is a real threat and has the potential to bring down enormous amounts of the global shipping infrastructure. It's not just shipping. This is a staggering number. Singapore has 28 active submarine cables redistributing telecommunications for intercontinental traffic. Here's the scale of this. $10 trillion every day of daily financial transactions flow through Singapore. This is hub vulnerability. Every system that is connected to these cables creates an opportunity for the adversary to attack. So supply chain is very, very important. The good news is we're very optimistic around the mathematics of defense. Unfortunately, the speed is our enemy. As I mentioned, Unit 42, our threat intelligence business unit, created an attack from start to exfiltration of data, and it was 25 minutes. If you think about the speed of decision-making in your own organizations, you think about the way governments are set up today. Nobody is set up to deal with the pace of the adversary coming like this. We are organizationally structured with committees. We have meetings. We have approval chains. The enemies don't. In fact, our enemies, they don't go to committee meetings. They don't go to governance meetings. They don't sit around boardroom tables wondering what decisions they need to make. They agree and they move. They collaborate better than public-private partnership. They collaborate better than technology companies do today. We have to get better at this. This is not a criticism. It's just a reality of the world in which we live in today. We are just not organized to deal with the pace of this. We have an opportunity, though. We have an opportunity to double down on the efforts of bringing private organizations and governments together. I am enthusiastic and optimistic as I walk out of this conference this week, because what I've seen is a transformation. Singapore International Cyber Week is in its 10th year, or its 10th edition. There's been more conversations in the last 48 hours between private and public organizations about how we can come together and collaborate. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to sit in a session. There was 22 cyber ambassadors in the room. And all 22 of them were concurrent on the fact that they needed more work with private organizations. They needed more voices in the room. They needed to bring a healthy balance between governance and speed. And there was a genuine recognition that the governments couldn't do it without private partnership, which I think is a fabulous outcome. And it's going to be an ongoing discussion, not just a one and done session at Singapore International Cyber Week, but an ongoing collaboration, which I know you'll see when the panel comes up here. They'll talk about threats and other things, but what you'll see there is a collaboration with organizations coming together. Problem shared is a problem halved, and we need to do more of it. Again, I'm very, very optimistic. I'm optimistic by nature, but I'm optimistic about what's going on in the artificial intelligence world. Palo Alto Networks, we've been doing this for more than a decade. Machine learning, deep learning, using generative AI. We use these tools and techniques to defend against these attacks. But every time there is an attack, we get better, we learn, we move faster, we collaborate. We actually collaborate. Technology companies actually collaborate together. I was just chatting with a competitor, you would argue a competitor of mine. We were collaborating and we were talking about how we share information between our organizations. In fact, we had a unique moment of collaboration. I actually fixed his collar for him. True story. But again, I just want to leave you the point. We shouldn't walk out of here with deep concerns around fear and that this cannot be stopped. These threats can be stopped through these collaborations, through the use of these tools and technologies. Our ability to take and collect information and learn and get faster and faster. So for every attack, the defense capabilities go up. The mathematics actually favor defense, but only if we come together and collaborate. Again, I shared the story of those 22 people in the room yesterday. It wasn't just about conversation. It was about how do we take information that we have and how do we share that information with other government organizations, and then how do we share that information with private practice. The fact that we're having those conversations now, again, raises my level of optimism and my belief that the mathematics for defense will go in our favor, because so much data is being collected around the world, whether it's industries like banking and finance or services, whether it's telecommunications, whether it's government, whether it's organizations like ours. We're collecting literally petabytes of information every single day, and we are learning from that information, which means we are getting better. And again, as I said, I believe and I'm optimistic that our future will be good as long as we collaborate, as long as we come together collectively and share this information, and we will get the best of both worlds. We'll get excellent governance inside our organizations, but we will get the speed of this collaboration and the speed of the learning that we get from bringing these together. So, 3 critical things that I believe we need to do. We need to get visibility. Without visibility, we cannot stop the adversary at the door. If we have visibility, we can stop them. If they're in, we can find them and we can stop them when they're in. But we have to have visibility. Not just visibility across the deployment of all our data, visibility across all the AI systems that are being deployed. You've walked around the show floor. Every single booth has AI on the booth. The enthusiasm is at fever pitch. What is wonderful to see now that is security is at the heart of it. Just 5 weeks ago, I was in Korea speaking at an event there. There were 2 thematics. It was crypto and artificial intelligence. The problem of all the conversations there was security was nowhere in the conversation. Now, I realize we're at a security conference, but AI is the opportunity for defense, but we have to help organizations deploy artificial intelligence bravely. We have to help organizations gain visibility of the AI ecosystem. There are literally hundreds of AI apps that are being used by employees in organizations that many don't have visibility to. So how we help them get that visibility is going to be important. We have to give them sanctioned apps, and we have to give them control around the unsanctioned apps so that they can stop the adversary using. Again, I mentioned speed. 25 minutes to build an attack to exfiltrate data. And these are threat analysts. These are not code developers. These are people that are exceptionally bright people. But this is not their main game. But they were able to do it. So therefore, speed is our enemy, but speed is also our opportunity. How do we come together? How do we build great governance outcomes and ensure that we do it expeditiously, and we rewire our organizations to be able to move at a pace that we need to move? I talked about cooperation between organizations. I gave a here and now example of how we come together as organizations. But what I'm hopeful for as you all walk out of this conference is that you think about the cooperation, not just between governments and technology providers, but how do you put us all in the room together to help solve these problems? Palo Alto Networks does not do everything. And if my team tell you we do, they're wrong. We do not. We're exceptional at what we do. But we know that we need to be in a collaborative environment with other technology providers. I was with a company today here. They have a booth downstairs, and my technology is in the rack, and the technology of one of the speakers who's coming up here shortly is also in the rack. They need both those technologies to solve this problem together. So it's a competitive world, but it's also a world built with friends who will come together to help organizations solve these problems. So cooperation, for me, I think of this as collaboration. How do we challenge each other with questions and ultimately get to a solution and an outcome that is solving the first two problems that we are faced with? Speed is our enemy, and we don't have visibility of everything today, and we need to get visibility of everything so that we can solve those other two problems. So those three critical factors, if you take nothing away from my talk today, how do you get visibility, not just of your AI apps, but absolutely everything across your organization? You need the visibility to stop the adversary at the door. Find them if they're in and stop them if they're in. You need to do it fast. And the only way you do it is if you collaborate and you cooperate. So, my vision, our vision by 2028 is that, and I think that's been the thematic of most of this last couple of days, is how are we going to look in 2028? We're going to have an AI resilient framework. We're going to have defense capabilities built with artificial intelligence. It's not going to be based upon just conversation. It's going to be about practical use of technologies, practical ways of coming together across private and public partnerships. There'll be multilateral capabilities, not just bilateral. We're going to use what I hope is that we will harness the power of countries across the world. That room yesterday with 22 people in it, they were from Europe, they were from America, they were from all across Asia Pacific, South America. They're all leaning into the conversation, which I think is encouraging. So I think we are set up for, again, an environment in 2028 where things will be better. We will be better than the adversary. We will be moving faster. We will have learnt more. We will be collaborating together, again, on those three critical success factors. So the conversation continues. We have to fly like birds. We have to come together, and we have to harness the power of many, many people. Hubs like Singapore are a force multiplier. They're not just a force multiplier for attackers, they're actually a force multiplier for defenders. If you think about the amount of data I just talked about, $10 trillion per day comes across those wires coming through Singapore. Literally 80 or 90% of the world's cargo ships are being redistributed. We are shipping a lot of stuff out of this country. So this country has a powerful platform to be a force multiplier in our defense capabilities against the adversary. So that's why Edward has put together an incredible panel of experts who are going to talk to you about the threat landscape. They're going to talk to you about how I think partnerships, private and public partnerships, are going to come together. And they're going to share their perspectives on the current threat landscape and how together we will learn, we will move faster, and we will ultimately be better equipped to stop the adversary at the door. So with that, thank you very much for having me. Edward, over to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next panel is titled Insights into 2025's Cyber Threats. And do put your hands together in welcoming our moderator and panelists for this afternoon.
Thank you so much. So first of all, welcome everyone. I think it's really a pleasure to see a lot of familiar faces, both locally in Singapore, a lot of partners, and a lot of, I think, our partners from overseas who have flown in as well. So thank you for spending this afternoon with us. I think, as you can see, I have a very esteemed panel of five panelists, I think really from different parts of the world and really specializing in different domains. I think I'm very excited today. I hope this will be a two-way conversation. So I highly encourage everybody, later when you see the QR code, please, while you're hearing, if you feel there are certain sort of questions, burning questions, please participate by putting your questions in and also upvoting so I know which ones are the ones that you really want to hear. So yeah, let's get into it. I think first thing, thank you, Simon, I think for the very good opening keynote. I think you really reminded us that in today's digital battlefield, speed is indeed the new enemy. Now, if defending at the speed is now the new challenge, then understanding the attacks themselves is where we begin, and hence the topic for today. And as we think about the cyber threats, I ask myself, what will we remember 2025 for? Will 2025 be remembered as a year that ransomware stopped everything? From your car factories, supermarkets, to even our worst favorite beer supply. Or some would say it's a critical infrastructure. Or will we remember it for the scam scourge, where scam syndicates are now operating like multinational enterprises with multi-billion-dollar operating profits, diversified business lines, and even a global scam workforce, where some would say hiring is still very strong. And all on a very serious note, will it be the year of the APT where no one is spared? Every country and every major enterprise that is of interest to a nation state intelligence interest is targeted. So on that note, let's open up the discussion. Let's hear one concern from each of you. What you believe is the most underappreciated threat in 2025? Maybe start with you, Derek.
Sure, thank you. This is a tough one because it's hard to put into one bucket, I would say. But thinking through this, I've been following the threat landscape for over 25 years. And I think one thing that I've observed, particularly in the last year, and is with APTs, the changing face of the APT, right? We all know nation state and APT, there's over 140 of the known ones mapped by MITRE to be what they are, right? Shifting left, always on the left, living left on reconnaissance, weaponization, having dwell times of 2 years plus, being very targeted in nature, typically not motivated financially. What we're seeing now is this shifted, this morphing face of APT, and it really is what is APC, Advanced Persistent Cybercrime. I have a quick example I give. Our forensics and incident response team at Fortinet, we looked at a case last year in the Middle East of an APT group is attributed to Fox Kitten, Lemon Sandstorm, targeting operational technology. And this group was like typical APTs in a system for 2 years. They were, though, doing different tactics, unlike the Stuxnets and the other APTs we saw 10 years ago, going right in and exhausting their playbook, so burning 0 days and everything that they had of the weaponization. They didn't do this. They used more typical cybercrime convention techniques. They used credential stuffing. They used spear phishing attacks. They used living off the land. Right, so really pretending to be an administrator in a system without trying to use novel payloads, up until a point after they had successfully got through 4 different fragmented networks, right, segmented networks. So from the IT network to the ICT network to the operational technology network, they were eventually discovered, where we got called in to clean it up. And at that point in time, they got forced into the corner and then started playing more hardball, right? So 4 0 days they pulled out of their pocket, 5 novel pieces of malware, right? So this changing face is happening because of this advanced persistent cybercrime theme. And I think that's very concerning. We're seeing more shared infrastructure and connections between APT groups and cybercriminal groups, specifically with infrastructure that have been built up, CVS, which is commercial vendor services, selling 0 days, so they're not even having to create it themselves, right? Like having a larger access to the attack surface. That's concerning to me. I think it's unappreciated. It's like the tactics are changing now of the APT. So it's something we have to pay attention to. So that's one thing. And I know I said I'd only talk about one threat, but the other one really is this accessibility. It's the going on the cybercrime end is this rise of cybercrime with accessibility that we're seeing. We're seeing just so many, unfortunately, so many players entering the game, including youth, teenagers, other people getting into cybercrime. That's a big concern to me because on one hand, we're trying to disrupt the tactical APT groups, but we have this whole other problem now that is actually coupled and closely related with APT groups as well.
But fascinating. So I think convergence between the cybercrime and APT groups, as well as now accessibility of cybercrime, that sounds really, really serious. I think from the span of ransomware cases we're seeing, I think that's really showing up.
And crime services as well. We're seeing a plethora of crime services now from deepfake service. And as I talked in the keynote earlier today at GovWare, the AI-enabled crime services. So that's also rapidly developing.
The list is adding.
Yes.
Thanks so much. Miho, I think from your vantage point from NTT and really seeing what you see, can you also share with us what is the underappreciated threat for 2025?
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Derek. Sure. APT is really concerning in the world. And APT has been already taking advantage of AI and generative AI and also on deepfake for financial gains, but also to launch more cyber attacks. And so I'd like to quote 2 different statistics about AI-enabled or Gen AI-enabled cyber attacks. So Radware found out that if you use generative AI, you can actually reduce the time to find vulnerabilities by 90%, 90%. So that's a huge number. And also, Sentinel-1 found out that they found that the phishing attacks increased over 1,200% thanks to generative AI. So we've already overwhelmed by not only teenagers, cyber criminals sponsored by state actors, but also APTs. And on top of that, now we are facing a sharp increase in Gen AI or AI-enabled cyber attacks. But what about security for AI? So I would argue that an underappreciated threats are supply chain security for AI itself. And it's already ongoing. So there are already two big examples of the threats to AI supply chain security risks. One is about the ByteDance. So their intern actually were able to manipulate the LLM training platform to attack the machine learning models, and they also found the researchers of Reversing Labs recently discovered earlier this year that 2 malicious machine learning models are uploaded to Hugging Face platform in February because the adversary was able to trick the security scanning tools, so they were able to upload malicious tools without flagging as unsafe. So we've been already taking advantage of machine learning and also Gen AI or AIs to enable human beings to scale our defensive capabilities. But at the same time, I wonder that now if the old-fashioned fact still stands. So human beings are still the weakest link in the cycle for any supply chain risks, including AI. And I know that the Singapore International Cyber Week has been so wonderful to talk about different types of risks and threats and also cybersecurity solutions. But I still struggle that so there have been already tools, and we are trying to develop trust in AI supply chain and also AI itself or generative AI. But security also comes later, not necessarily baked into AI itself. And I wonder how we can flip the order to make sure that security is baked into supply chain for anything. Thank you.
Thanks, Miho. I think the point about security of AI and also like secure by design, should also be implemented as we think about how to really scale up the AI implementation. I think the points are very well taken. Thank you for that. I think next to Roy, how do you see this from a government perspective?
Well, it's a very difficult question because I had to pick just one. And I would say that the most under managed that we have experienced in the last 2 years with the conflict are the hybrid threats. They are very, very effective. First, the intensity, it increases due to the sophistication and the learning curve that our opponents have had throughout this war. The technology which they use is constantly improving. And as was mentioned before in the keynote, the time to exploit is getting shorter and shorter. What used to take weeks now takes hours. Our attack surfaces are constantly growing, using more digital services, doing more things digitally, more AI. And I don't want to think what's going to happen with quantum. And that kind of hybrid attacks that we've seen to be very effective involved first cyber attacks that we've been experiencing throughout, influence, mis and disinformation attacks, and campaigns to scare the public. And when those are added to the kinetic ballistic missiles, it's very effective. So as an example, Israel's Weizmann Institute, it's our most prestigious university for sciences, I would say. Academia in Israel is targeted and has been targeted for quite some time, throughout the war as well. Then they started receiving emails, the professors there, that their institute will be destroyed. And a few days later, 2 ballistic missiles landed in the institute, destroying many labs. Now, this has an effect on the public. And therefore, I think hybrid attacks are very effective. And our enemies do those things simultaneously. They work together. And therefore, we have to work together to prevent that as well.
Thanks, Roy, for that. I think the whole idea of cyber, information, kinetic, all being rolled into one, I think that's very powerful, and especially the psychological impact on the populace. Now, if I can now switch over to Charles, from a Southeast Asian perspective, how do you see this question?
Great. No, thank you so much, Edward. And I like how you started the conversation about how 2025. Certainly at one level, we are definitely seeing the APT attacks increase. I think we know that 40% of the attacks in Southeast Asia now are APT level attacks or APT driven attacks. At the same time, we are seeing, of course, a lot of ransomware across this part of the world. But if you ask what's something that's a bit underappreciated, at least from what we can see, maybe not just Southeast Asia, but globally as well, is that there's a convergence between the scamming operators and sort of APT groups. And that's something that I think we know and we got very interested in the past 2 years that we didn't think was actually happening. And it's happening in a couple of ways. Maybe just to throw a statistic for everyone to note, in the year 2022, the entire cybercrime revenue overtook the entire drug trade globally. If we let that sink in, the entire cybercrime amount of revenue driven overtook the entire drug trade globally. Which means that if you are a criminal boss, clearly you see the value in doing this. So when you look at scam operators, even in our part of the world, it's become a very advanced institution. It's not just taking phone calls and doing sort of, trying to do social engineering. It's not just sending SMSs, right? They're also developing very advanced cyber capabilities. They are buying services from initial access brokers. We're seeing them collaborate with APT groups. They themselves are developing such capabilities in order to sort of drive revenue. I think they owe a certain value to their shareholder. They have to drive growth, but they are building those capabilities as well. So we are seeing that happening, and it's actually happening. And Southeast Asia is definitely one hotbed for that. We're also seeing that happen in other parts of the world. So that's something that's interesting for us.
Thanks, Charles. I think you reminded me that we are always a strong advocate of the saying that cyber is a team sport. But unfortunately, I think the scam operators have also heard it. So,
yep.
Among all of us, I think Esteban is the most digital and also crypto native. And then I'd like to get his views on, Charles was scams. What was your view on these underappreciated threats?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I agree with Charles. Cyber-enabled fraud. I think it's underappreciated, and it reflects in the investment that society has made in fighting fraud. I would love to see both private sector, financial institutions, double, triple, quadruple their investment in fighting fraud and scams. I'd love to see the public sector do the same. Singapore is a leader in fighting fraud and scams. You have the anti-scam command. I wish every federal law enforcement agency around the world had an anti-scam command. I think it's warranted. It's necessary. Right now, the balance of investment doesn't line up with the severity of the impact that fraud and scams are having on public safety. Just to put it in perspective, so last year, total amount of ransomware payments to ransomware groups is about $1 billion. On the low side of the total payments to scams and frauds, on the low side, $30 billion, with 30 to 1. For every $1 paid to a ransomware group, $30 billion are being paid to transnational organized crime groups, these scam syndicates. And on the high side, if you assume say only 15, 20% of scams are reported, that's hundreds of billions of dollars. And I think we have to ask ourselves, well, why are we investing a lot more? By the way, I'm not advocating we should decrease our investment in fighting ransomware, but I think we should substantially increase our investment in fighting fraud. I think part of it is, fighting ransomware attacks is sexier. There's a big headline and there's a very visible victim, but with scam losses, it's dispersed across, many, many different people. Companies have bigger budgets than individuals. As an individual, they're not buying a vendor to protect themselves on scams. So I understand why the economics have led us to this world where there is this mismatch in investment, but I do think it's very underappreciated. And I think we're just now starting to see the impact of letting fraud go unchecked, which is when you have tens of billions of dollars of profit going to transnational organized crime groups, there's a lot of negative externalities. You end up creating the money laundering infrastructure that serves cartels, nation state hackers, and other threat actors. You subsidize the development of the money laundering industry. You also end up subsidizing corruption, because fundamentally there's no way that these criminal enterprises are able to receive and offload tens of billions of dollars in profit without corruption, without bribery. And corruption is a tax on society. It's a tax on people who work hard to make a fair living. So obviously I'm very passionate about fraud and scams, and I think it's a huge underappreciated threat. I'm obviously very also encouraged because I think Singapore has been a leader. I think what we saw last week with the takedown of Prince Group, we're making progress there, and hope we continue to do so.
Thanks, Esteban. I think those are very sobering statistics. I think that underpins really the importance as we think about cyber. We keep our minds open about, I think, where are the related areas that are also impacting society. They shift gear a bit, I think, really looking at the so what, so what must we do? I think I'd like to ask a question. What is one key capability, policy, or mindset shift that defenders must now develop to stay ahead of this set of evolving threats that I think we just spoke about? Maybe if I can start with Charles, I think if you can start to share.
Great, thanks,
Thank
Edward.
you.
And maybe this is also something I suppose we have discussed. We have one of the most significant sort of incident response capabilities in this part of the world. 70 to 75% of the cases we respond to actually is still ransomware. Basic things like, no backup, very simple sort of foundational capabilities. And so maybe not just one new capability, but actually for the large majority, and most of them are actually not in this room today, for 80% of the people who are affected, it's really about just building the set of foundational capabilities in cybersecurity. Awareness, making sure you deploy your EDRs, making sure the boys properly trained, you do your exercises. For 80% of the enterprises in the part of the world that we serve, it's really just building the foundational capabilities, proper backup, and that could resolve so many issues for all of us. Yep.
That's a good reminder. What about Roy from a government perspective?
So, as the government point of view, I think we need a more holistic approach, and this is something that we put down in our new strategy for cybersecurity published in the first quarter of 2025. The scope is getting wider. If in the past we looked at cyberspace, now we look at the digital domain. We realize that it all needs to be secure. If we looked just at cybersecurity, now we realize that we have to have trust in the whole digital realm. And if in the past we put a lot of effort to secure our critical infrastructure, and we actually did so far quite a good job at it with 0 successful cyber attacks to our critical infrastructure, we realize that many attacks come from the small and medium businesses, and those were more successful. So we need to look at the whole of market. So I think as a government, we have to put down the norms. We have to raise awareness throughout the citizens and businesses, and we have to have technology at scale. Because it isn't feasible for a government to work one organization after another. There needs to be technologies to cover the entire market. And that is why we changed our vision in the new strategy to a trustworthy, reliable, and safe digital space that enables all the benefits of a modern and thriving economy.
That's very interesting. You can double down on this whole market thinking. I'm just curious in your sense, how do you think that has manifested, or how do you think that being a government official, you can actually sort of encourage that kind of thinking?
So I can share about what we have done throughout the last 2 years in the war. Even before, we have an apparatus, a mechanism called the orchestra, where all the relevant government cyber agencies sit together on a weekly basis and discuss what is happening. Mostly it used to be on the operational level. And then throughout the war, actually when the war began, we started engaging on a daily basis, seeing the entire picture. We managed to do that as we needed. And this is something that we did well, but we need to do much, much stronger. We need to go from very good to excellent, and we have to improve in that. Second, we had collaboration with the private sector. And actually, I was surprised at how many private sector cybersecurity companies wanted to assist other companies that needed assistance and municipalities, for instance, that weren't as secure as they should have been. So that is something that, well, during wartime, the population, people try to help each other, but that also worked very well.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think if you can turn to Esteban, I think, what's your view on this?
On this topic, or
No, on basically the shift, that capability, mindset, policy shift.
yeah, I think the one avenue that we've seen be really effective, so on frauds, is attacking the balance sheet of the adversary. Both fraud and ransomware, it's financially motivated. So we criminals are in the business to make money, and if you want to reduce crime, if you can either lower their revenue or increase their costs, that's a very effective way to decrease the amount of illicit activity. Again, I think Singapore has been leading on this front. So if you look at like 2024 fraud losses in Singapore, about 1.1 billion, Singapore police force has had an initiative where they've been able to use blockchain intelligence and other techniques to trace payments and recover ultimately nearly $200 million of those losses. So that's 18%. That's pretty significant. If you're a business and 18% of your revenue is being taken back, that's pretty significant. Another technique that was really valuable in attacking the balance sheet of the adversary is proactively contacting victims. So at one of the campaigns that SPF has been doing is proactively identifying victims of fraud and contacting them very early on in the life cycle of that fraud scheme, because people, they don't lose money in a single transaction. They lose money over the course of weeks and months. And if you pick up the phone and you call these victims and you say, hey, you're losing money to a fraud scheme, you can prevent further losses. And the estimates are about 450, almost $500 million that law enforcement here in Singapore has been able to prevent in terms of further losses. So I look at that and I become extremely optimistic, because if you're telling me that I've got $1.1 billion of losses, and we have interventions that can claw back 200 million or even 500 million, then scaling, if you can scale 2 or 3x what you're already doing, we solve the issue. Now, obviously, it's more complex than that. But I think, very encouraged by this technique of let's go after the balance sheet, let's claw back revenue, let's notify victims proactively and prevent those payments from going to the adversaries to begin with.
Thanks for that. I think, Derek?
Well, first of all, I completely agree with Esteban on from a policy mind shift to public and private collaboration and disruption of cybercrime. I absolutely agree with that. I have a lot to say on that. I actually spoke at the World Economic Forum in Davos earlier this year on disrupting the economics of cybercrime, and I think there's some great examples out there of that. It's a disruption chain, right? So organizations are part of that chain. They're the end part of the chain, right, for the attacks, but hardening the defenses actually and going after, as you said, the balance sheet and disrupting the economics, that plays a key role. That effectively does reduce your attack surface. So I completely agree with that. But switching lenses to a different point of view, defragmentation of people, processes, and technology. So I'll explain what that means. So we already talked about the problem, the shrinking window of the time to exploit, the growing attack surface. There was 40,000 CVEs last year, 39,000 on track. That's almost almost 100,000 CVEs. It's just a rapidly expanding attack surface. That's the reality that we live in today. So the issue I see, though, a lot of organizations have fragmentation. You have different reporting streams from the CIO and the CISO, the NOC and the SOC have different stacks in them. They're not integrated. They don't have the same visibility. You can't, when you have a large attack surface and you have all these tools from AI-enabled cyber fraud and crime going after targets, it becomes a much bigger issue. So we need to solve that within organizations. That would be my ask, right? It's this defragmentation, breaking down those silos so you have the convergence of platforms, reporting streams from CIO and CSO, so NOC and SOC into a single platform where you can get visibility and respond to that. I think that's very important. So right now, that's a technology, so the technology exists. There's just a lot of these stacks that are sitting out there, not integrated, playing well together. Doing that and having that visibility and automated responses through playbooks and all of that, it has a tremendous effect, right? It's able, as was said in the keynote, it allows response in seconds to minutes versus a slower, at the time, a slower adversary for now. So I think that's critically important. But yeah, going back to the public and private partnerships, we need to really go after the disruption angle, and that's all part of that chain.
That's great. I think the defragmentation, I think is very important for speed. I think that's what Simon has highlighted. I think it's also a good segue into our next question, really about partnerships. I think partnerships between government, industry, research community. I think really how can we collaborate more effectively to anticipate, respond to these fast-moving threats? And what are some good examples in the real world we can learn and emulate? Miho, if I can ask you to go next.
Sure. So because I work at a Japan-based telco critical infrastructure companies, so I'd like to share my perspective how we can incentivize the industry or critical infrastructure companies to do more for public-private or academia partnerships. So, first of all, I'd like to congratulate Edward and also CSAs, because the Singapore International Cyber Week has been a convening power for better and stronger unwavering public-private and also academic partnerships. So thank you so much for your continued support to do that. But because I'm from the industry, so how can we incentivize the industry and critical infrastructure companies to do more for public-private partnerships? So I think that I can think of 3 tools to incentivize the industry. So one is the speed of intelligence sharing. The second one is liability exemption ruling. And the last but not least is exercises between the government and industry. So first of all, the speed of intelligence sharing. So I really would like to comment the Singapore, but also my country, Japan, that because the government have been doing a lot more to share cybersecurity intelligence in a sanitized manner, but also in a classified manners to help the industry and also critical infrastructures to prevent any service disruptions or any intelligence stealing. But still, the classified intelligence sharing can slow down the speed of sharing. And also, you can do sanitized intelligence sharing, but still, it will limit the scope of sharings because you really cannot share the context that the industry leaders need to know to prioritize how urgent it is to suspend some of their crucial services to serve their customers. So I think that what the government may want to seek is how to establish the cycle to make sure that you can keep providing a structured and also timely intelligence either in a sanitized or classified manner. The second is liability exemption. Probably if you're from the government, I'm sure that you will feel like, okay, here we go, industry is complaining about liability exemptions. But here's a real issue. Because I know that the government and industry have been sharing us so much more these days because we are now facing geopolitical tensions, but also service disruptions. So that's great. I'm really, really grateful for that. But still, the more sharing needs coordination between the industry, cybersecurity agency, and also law enforcement. But whenever police starts investigation, they may stop the industry, victim company, from sharing incident information, even from reporting to their own regulator. And it creates some troubles because that victim company may find themselves in regulatory trouble later because they look like they are holding that information from regulation. So that is why maybe we can do better in terms of the coordination between cybersecurity agency, law enforcement, and also regulated critical infrastructure companies. And the last, not least, is the resilience exercises. So I know that in Singapore, you are already having the joint exercises from different ministries, agencies, but also from different sectors of critical infrastructure. And that is great. And we in Japan are also cybersecurity agency has been doing that joint exercise between the critical infrastructure companies, but also different ministries and agencies over the last decade or so. And that's great. I'm really grateful for that. But I think that what we can do more is not just focusing on the scenario sector by sector, because each organization can do it to test our responsive capabilities. But what the industry cannot do is to serve as a broker to make sure that even adversary is able to bring down a specific service like telco or power or water. It doesn't create cascading effects to take down other services as well. So it's a resilience stress test for across the sectors, not just one specific sector. So if the government can do it as a broker for the nationwide resilience testing, I think that's great.
Thanks so much, Mihoko. I think the point on training and exercises, especially, and also resilience stress testing, I think is very important. If I can shift to Charles, I understand Ensign also does some form of training, but a different kind of training. But can you share a bit more?
Okay, thank you, Edward. So for Ensign, maybe as a preamble, it's something I've ruminated on for a long time. Structurally, if you look at government, academia, and the commercial sector, the interests are very asymmetrical. Government will always see cyber as national interest, and you will always require high-end capability. Commercial will always see cyber as a cost. You have to balance that with all your other interests. And then the academia will always want to publish, right? And these three interests do not come together nicely. So at an operational level, I've asked myself, how do you resolve something like that? And I realized that actually at the operational level, people like to help people they know. So when you have conferences like this, when we gather people together, very soon we'll be talking and I know you. So if I see something, I'll call you. So we do monthly gatherings of CISOs, and we have we sort of share with board of directors. So actually Ensign, we are committed to train 1,000 board of directors through the Singapore Institute of Directors. In this past we have trained 150, we have another 850 to go. But what I found very interesting is, very soon everyone start to get to know each other. When they come for our training, some of the board directors begin to say, "Hey, you're doing this." They say, "Yeah, you're doing this." Let's get our CIOs to talk to each other. We have CISOs who come for our gatherings and then we share. And then very soon they're calling each other, "Hey, do you see this?" "Yeah, I also, And then everyone begins to talk. And just this very soft level of connection actually creates a level of operational effectiveness that we didn't realize when we started to do all this training. When we started to gather all these people together. And that's something we realized helps overcome some of this asymmetry of interest because people do like to help people they know.
Thanks so much, Charles. And I must caveat that, I was pleasantly surprised when I found out about this because Cybersecurity Agency, my agency, didn't spend a single cent on this. So we highly encourage this kind of ground-up, community-driven approach to really, to train and educate our folks, especially the very senior ones. Maybe if I can sort of last person on this question, if you can turn to Esteban, because he doesn't talk about disruption. Also understand you develop a very interesting multi-sided marketplace, to really to enable this disruption. Can you explain a bit more and really what are the sort of considerations and challenges in setting up something like this?
Sure. So earlier this year, TRM launched the Beacon Network. It's the largest global public-private partnership to fight crime that uses cryptocurrency. And in just a couple of months since we've launched, the network has it's a global network of law enforcement agencies and cryptocurrency businesses. The network has come together to freeze over $40 million of illicit funds linked to ransomware attacks, scams, terror financing, hacks from individuals and exchanges. It's been very successful. The membership on the private sector side represents 80% of all cash out volume in crypto. So we've got really good coverage in terms of if there's stolen cryptocurrency and you activate the Beacon network, 80% of the crypto industry, cash out volume is monitoring for those illicit funds to freeze. And then we also work with law enforcement. So the way that this came together, there was a couple, I think, key insights that we had. One was information sharing by itself is just trivia. It's interesting. For information sharing to be valuable, you have to say, so that what? Okay, so I'm going to share, law enforcement in the Beacon Network can share information about wallet addresses that are holding stolen funds so that exchanges can freeze those funds whenever those funds hit the exchange. And I think too oftentimes with public-private partnerships, we're not answering what's the so that of sharing the intel. That was the first thing that we did. We said, okay, we're going to build the information sharing layer where law enforcement can flag wallets that are holding illicit funds. And then we're going to build the connectivity to the exchanges so that they can get alerts in real time and are able to put voluntary compliance holds on those funds if they hit their exchange. And that's been really important because now the success metric for the Beacon network is not, how many wallets did we share? Success is how much money did we freeze? How much money did we give back to victims? So that's been one really important lesson. I think the second really important lesson, and this kind of gets back to what you were saying, Miho, around the incentives and making sure, and Derek as well, making sure that the incentives are all aligned across the different actors. When we set out to build the Beacon network, law enforcement obviously is very incentivized to recover stolen funds, and exchanges are very incentivized to not have illicit funds on their platform. And so we actually created two different pitches. We had a crypto business pitch deck, and we had a law enforcement pitch deck, and we were selling the benefits of the network to both sides of the marketplace in order for them to come together. So Beacon Network, it's live today. It's free to join, and it's the network that enables both public sector and private sector to come together to stop illicit funds. The reason why that's so important is in scams, roughly about 60 to 70% of scam payments are in cryptocurrency, and in ransomware, about 100% of ransomware payments are in cryptocurrency. So going back to that, the original point that I was making earlier, if we can build this real-time system for alerting and freezing illicit funds in crypto, we can make a real dent on the adversary's balance sheet.
Thanks, Esteban. I thought this is really great. I think it's also a good segue now into the sort of a drawn-out Q&A. I'd like to take some of the questions that I think you have posed. Maybe we can start with this one first, if you can pull out this. Yep. Can you pull out the question? Yep. I think I'll read. Looking ahead, which emerging technologies or geopolitical trends do you expect will most influence the cyber risk landscape in the next 12 to 18 months? I think being a global company like Fortinet, maybe I ask Derek to go first.
Yeah, I'm actually working on our 2026 forecast. So
great.
A timely question at the moment. So a couple of things, right? I think on the political trends, just carrying on what Esteban was saying, I think there's great communities being built. So this is a good thing, right? These are emerging technologies like platforms that are enabling threat intelligence sharing at scale between multi-nation, not just in silos for regionalized intelligence, but global community hubs. We have these United Nations Cybercrime Convention being signed in the next week. There's a good example of that, talking about these things that are critical. And that's definitely a trend, I think, that is going to really shape in a good way to help mitigate some of that risk on the threat landscape. And we have great examples like the Beacon Network. We launched 3 years ago Cybercrime Atlas also, which is mapping the cybercriminal ecosystem, looking at different business units and how to share that with law enforcement, with public sector, to be able to expose operations, to answer questions like, are there 100? Are there 150? Are there 1,000 ransomware operators out there? So I think on the technology platform, that's always the good thing. And there's always an inverse of this, right? Of course, so weaponization of artificial intelligence. In fact, on Friday, we have a full day of workshops just on AI-enabled cybercrime, real research examples that are happening today. We see this at Fortinet. We issued it on our threat landscape report. We are seeing, I mentioned it at the start, a growing array of crime as a service. So cybercrime services that are being fueled by AI, by tools now that are uplifting the cyber criminal from those level 1 duties they would typically have to perform. And I think that's a big issue. That's going to really shape the landscape, because now it's not just human-based interaction in each element of that phase of the chain, right? From doing reconnaissance, weaponizing a technology, whether it's an exploit or a piece of malware, all of those things that are done typically manually now are being automated, are being now put into tools that are low investments. I mean, we're talking about $500 to $1,000 for a lifetime subscription to these offline GPT models that can be used for really convincing spear phishing attacks. That's an issue. That's rapidly already changing the landscape. In the next 12 to 18 months, I think it will more. Yeah.
Thanks, Derek. Maybe I ask Roy to lean in. Roy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Geopolitically, for Israel, I'll speak for my government. We're hoping that the war is over, but I'm not so optimistic about cybersecurity. I think the cyber demon is out of the bottle, and cyber attacks will continue to be very high in the 12 to 18 months. We've seen a significant rise in the last 2 years, and we definitely expect that to continue, even at a higher pace. So in the sense of technologies, well, AI was mentioned several times, and we see that in I guess the time to exploit that's really decreasing. So I guess that's a sign that it's happening. And just to conclude, I really like the slide on the keynote of the shark and the school of fish, talking about the economics of cyber defense, that there is an economic side to it. And I guess that better collaboration could really assist in making defense much better and more economic. And I really hope that in the next year and a half, we can do that, both public, private, and international collaborations.
Thanks. Miho, would you like to share just a bit of perspective on this as well?
So because we started to see more like a geopolitically oriented cyber threats in the Middle East, but also in Europe. And also we started to see like a more extreme climate, natural disasters, every part of the world. I wondered if state-sponsored actors, but also even cyber criminals can take advantage of not only like higher geopolitical tensions, but also like happen to be like huge natural disasters like a typhoon or tsunami or floodings, so that people are already so in short of resources to respond to like natural disasters. And what would happen if the cyber criminals or state-sponsored actors to launch AI-enabled cyber attacks? So I think so that is why it is so getting even more crucial to have a convening power, not just on own. And I'm glad to see that there have been already platforms available to share cyber threat intelligence. But not only that's focusing on cyber threats, we have to think about physical threats, including war and conflict, but also natural disasters given climate change.
Oh, it's very, very sobering. If we can move on to the next question, I think it's talking about human in the whole attack chain. Can you see? Okay. I'll read the question. Okay. Despite technological advancement, human error remains a major vulnerability. How can organizations better integrate cybersecurity awareness in their culture? Maybe I invite Charles. About the role of human and how can we fix this human error problem?
I always remember what CSA always said, right? David Koh, he always said the greatest vulnerability is the nut sitting behind the computer. And until today, it's still proven true. But I will say one thing: with regards to humans, there's a few key things, right? And it goes across a variety of layers. I think if you look at Singapore, what Singapore does very well is, number one, they mandate that across the critical infrastructure of operators, the directors must be trained and must go through a series of regular exercises. And just by going through all of that, the sort of awareness across the organization is increased. So I think that's quite important. And then across the rest of the organization, typically, I think many organizations today are doing a lot of gamification or training, and we find that to be particularly useful. Where I think major challenges are not in the organization, but actually is at the consumer level. It's how do you make sure that the vast market and the populace begin to understand the cyber threats? How do you deal with scams, etc.? On that layer, I think it's an area that I think many countries are struggling with, and based on where we are beginning to see the same thing. But where organizations do very well is that constant training, never giving up. But what I particularly like is when they do gamification. For example, I remember there used to be this CSA used to have this vending machine. This was in the Ministry of Health. I remember that. Across SGH, and if you answer questions correctly, they give you a prize, like drops out of the vending machine. And I thought that was very good because people all queued up to answer the cyber questions. So I think that's something we can do. We can do cyber awareness in a fun way, and actually sort of helps us in many ways.
Thanks. Esteban?
To make the panel exciting, I'll give a different take.
Yes, please.
I'm not optimistic about awareness as like an effective cybersecurity defense tool. I mean, how many years have we been telling people like don't set password as password? Like 30, 40 years we've been telling people that, and still you have municipal water treatment facilities that are getting hit by an attack because they set password as password. So I think there's two reasons why I don't think that awareness is the right place to invest. One is because even when the ask is very simple, humans don't do a good job doing it. But number two is even when people are extreme, I think what we've learned from the fraud space is we being criminals have figured out how to hack the human brain. Like tens of thousands of really sophisticated, really smart people are being tricked every day to send money willingly to a scammer, a fraudster. Maybe it's somebody that they believe they're in love with. And these, by the way, these are not, I think it's easy when you haven't been scammed to think, oh, that will never happen to me. But I've now talked to so many victims who are people who are extremely digital literate, who know about scams, and they also fall victim, to these scams. And so when I look at especially with AI and the ability for AI to improve itself, I don't think that the human brain is going to be effective at detecting the most sophisticated, like industrial level, whether scams, frauds, or phishing messages. So I would argue like we have to just defend our systems to assume that people will get tricked into clicking into an email or downloading a file or falling in love with somebody and sending money to their investment scheme.
Thanks. Oh, Mihoko, please.
So I think as Esteban mentioned, it's impossible to eradicate human errors and mistakes, unfortunately. So we have to admit it first. But we can still change the world for better. So I think there are two ways to do it. So one is how to empower cybersecurity professionals more. And the other one is how to empower non-necessary cybersecurity professionals more. So I think that to do it, we have to make sure that both community cybersecurity professionals, but also non-technical, non-tech savvy people feel like that they are part of the community. They are part of the community to change the world or their organization or their country for better. So my company, NTT, has been taking two actions to do it. So one is to make my cybersecurity colleagues feel more empowered and so proud themselves. Is that actually my manager, Global CISO Shinichi Yokohama, has been leading efforts to publish a story, an unsung people's story. Because cybersecurity professionals cannot necessarily talk about what kind of struggles they face every single day. Because they are dealing with very sensitive issues. But my manager, but also my leadership understands their internal struggle, but they started to publish a series of books about what kind of cybersecurity professionals out there and what kind of unsung stories cybersecurity professionals are doing in the different domains like AI and privacy.
I think on that note, it's also quite important because I think the stories allow us to relate to all the challenges that other fellow cyber defenders have, and we can commiserate together.
Yeah, sure.
I thought on that note, I just want to I think we are coming up to time soon, so I thought maybe want to just wrap up to be on a slightly more positive note. I think really looking towards to 2026 and really at a personal level, many of us in the room are cyber defenders in all different roles, playing different parts to really defend our respective organization and countries. I thought, what is one advice that you give to cyber defenders to get ready for 2026 and the years ahead? We can start with you, Derek.
Yeah, so I think couple of things, right? Empowering. I like that. So empowering. We always talk about this skills gap and resource issues we have on the cyber defenders issue, but in reality, we have good people, and we can never hire our way out of this problem. We have the technology we talked about that is very valid today. So I think embracing that technology, but also shifting your existing resources left. Right? Because we're seeing also a shift, just like we saw this shift and morph in cyber APTs and cyber criminals. I was talking about the analyst role, the SOC role in defenders, that's shifting as well. So empowering them, getting them excited. We talk about upskilling, but it's not just upskilling, it's also shifting into this new role to work and embrace that technology. I think that's absolutely critical. And then at the same time, I'll just throw in governance to support the public and private partnerships. It's worked well at Fortinet for us. All of our public and private partnerships, it's under our ESG, corporate social responsibility. It's reported up to the Fortinet board, and it's supported. And that's critical. And I think if all organizations embrace this, we're going to be collectively stronger together.
Thanks, Derek. Maybe Mihoko, just a quick one.
Sure. So my advice for cyber defenders in the world is to make sure to take care of yourself.
Oh, that's a very important advice.
Right? Because we will face more cyber attacks for sure next year. But so that's why, but to take care of ourselves, we cannot just rely on AI. Human beings involved. So that's why I really appreciate your support for cyber defenders. Thank you.
Thank you, Miho. Roy?
I would say continuous readiness. And readiness, in my opinion, means both in terms of robustness and in terms of preparing. Impact will happen, and we need to accept that. And how do we react once it happens? We have to think about it under the fluorescent lights with a cup of coffee in our hands before it actually happens.
Thank you. That's very, very good advice. Readiness. So, Charles?
Thank you. If I was talking to someone from someone this morning, and he started as in NSA, and then today he's a sort of global chief strategy officer, having sold 2 companies. If there's one common thread I see in successful cyber defenders is they have an extensive network. Cyber is more than just a technical game. It's a multidisciplinary sport when you understand so many things. But nothing beats knowing people and having people know you.
Oh, that's a very strong one, I think, especially for, the room full of professions like this, a very diverse background. Esteban?
I would build your first AI agent. The tech is ready now. You can build an AI workflow that, maybe it's triaging vulnerabilities, maybe it's providing an initial assessment of an alert. Our security team has been building a lot of internal agents to do that type of work, and the tech is ready. And there's low code, no code tools that are either low cost or open source to do that.
Thank you. I think a very timely thing, especially they call 2025, besides the threats, is also purportedly the year of the agent. So I think it's a very timely reminder. I think if you allow me to wrap up, I think today has been quite a fascinating thing. We talk about ransomware, scams, APTs, and really throughout the different domains and geographical regions. I think if I can sort of wrap up by sort of just picking at 3 quotes of the day that I've heard. First, the cyber demon is out of the water, so you better get ready. Second, criminals have already figured out how to hack the human mind. I think that is also a very sobering advice. And I like Miho's very powerful thing. I think you just know that cyber threats is here to stay. It's not going to go away. That's why we all still have a job. But at the same time, remember to take care of ourselves. So on that note, please put your hands together and thank our esteemed panel.
And a very big thank you as well to our moderator, Mr. Edward Chin, and our panelists.